Hello racers, and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to continue the setup guide series with a review of the Essential Off-Road RC Racer's Guide. Now this Racer's Guide, as you can see, is a full book of content. Over 300 pages. So what I thought I'd do in this review is we could just go through it, introduce the chapters and what content was in it, and give you a summary of what's in there. I thought that would be a better way to go through, and we could get through it pretty quick, giving it a good review and protecting Dave Stevens' content. So let's dig in. First off, this book was written in 2021. Now I ordered my copy in November and I received it late December. This book, let's move to the second section. See the players of the contributors of the book. First off, we have Bruno Coelho. He's representing the four-wheel drive championship, world championship driver. We have Billy Easton, who is a two-wheel drive world champion. And we have Ray Monday. So Ray, I noticed that Dave Stevens likes to put a little mystery and intrigue into his books. And the mystery of this book is there's no mention of Ray on the cover, but he is a contributor to the book. And as I went through it, he contributed a lot of content to it. We'll see how it all plays out. And the author, Dave B. Stevens. Now he has written several of these racing guides. This is the most recent one, but he's also authored the Essential 1/12 F1 Racer's Guide and also the Touring Car Guide. And those are in this setup guide series. So what Dave does is he gathers the information together and he has it peer reviewed by the other contributors. So that's great. Let's take a look at the next chapter here. The process of driving faster. Now this particular chapter in the book is excellent for new and existing racers alike. What this section talks about, different driving types, talk about different racing lines, talks about when you would apply brakes, talks about different cornering styles such as early apexes, late apex, the standard apex. So in this section, this chapter of the book will save tenths off your lap times. Probably each time you read this chapter, you would save another tenth. So this is great, great ideas. Get you into the racing mindset. Learning how to connect several corners together in a series versus, just taking a corner one at a time. Connecting them in series, maybe you come out of a corner in a certain way so you can go faster through the next one. So this section, excellent. He gives the new and existing racers great insight on driving, different lines around the track, race etiquette, corner marshalling, all that kind of stuff. So chapter 2, perfect. Saves the tenths. Chapter 3, jumping. Here's another section that is going to save you tenths off your lap times. In this section, contributed a lot by Ray Monday. It talks about the basics of jumping, doing a track walk, looking at the face of the jump, and figuring out the angle, whether you would accelerate up that jump, coast up it, or maybe even brake on the face. Talks about doubles, triples, when you'd want to downside a jump versus land flat. So again, this section here, each time you would read it, you would take a tenth off your lap time. And I've heard that a racer that read this jumping section and that previous driving section, that he got his lap time down to 0. Now it's not confirmed, but there's a lot of information in there to take the tense off your laps. Okay, so that's the jumping section. Well worth the read. And the next section we have here is the track. Now this is a small section to put the racer in the racer's mindset of doing a track walk, checking out where the track gets rough, watching the track as it evolves over time through the day, as it builds character, as you hear off-road racers say. Noticing what kind of curbing there is, whether it's just pipe or if there's like a tire or a flat curb. You keep an eye on the surface, the layout, keep track of where the ruts form. So this is more of about awareness of the track, not just throwing your car down and doing laps, but analyzing the track and noticing it might start wet in the morning and dry during the day and get dusty. So again, excellent information for the new racer. Something that this kind of gives you that experience that others have, raced on the track and have learned. You can get a heads up. Now, the section, one of my favorites, the section on tires. This was contributed, I think, by Ray Monday. I recognize a lot of his work in here. Where the other two sections save tenths, picking the right tires will, one, save you a ton of money rather than buying the wrong tires. And the other, 80% of an off-road car's handling is the tires. There is no adjustment that can fix wrong tires. So this section here is worth the price of the book, I would say. Discusses all the different compounds that you can get for tires, like soft compound, ultra soft. So it discusses the compound, the tread pattern, whether it's pins or bars or ghost patterns. It talks about the inserts, whether it's closed cell foam, open cell foam, when to use what. And what's the benefit of this one is that it shows what tires to use when. So this is a great chapter. This is going to save someone a lot of money. And I personally would have spent, hundreds of dollars in testing, learning what tires work on what surface. And with this book, it gives that to you right away, so that I consider this section here priceless. See, this will save you a lot of money, where the previous sections take the tenths off your lap. Okay, so there's quite a bit of information there on tires. You can see it's 1/4 inch thick. Great stuff. Chapter 6 is the time when you actually get to the car setup reference. Right, so this is aptly called a racer's guide, where most of it is dedicated to, getting the driver into the racer's mindset. Talking about jumps and corners and tires. This section here, the car setup guide, it is presented alphabetically, and what we'll do is, to be consistent across all of them, I've been focusing on roll center. And focusing on here just to give you an idea of what the content, how it's laid out in the book. And I've been really focused on roll center changes because it's it's a confusing aspect to setup of your RC car, and over time the concept has changed. I just wanted to highlight here. We'll get out our little sheet, talk about roll center, the traditional approach to it through a corner. So with a low roll center, and low roll center meaning the car will roll more, during the approach, the car is spending its time rolling. So when it's rolling, it's not gaining a lot of bite on corner entry. But because it has rolled, by mid-corner and exit, you get more grip. So traditionally, a low roll center gets more grip mid and exit. A high roll center, in the approach and entry, because the car is not rolling, you get the most grip that the car will make during those two sections. So high roll center would give you more entry steering. But because the car hasn't rolled, you get less mid-corner and exit. So let's just apply that to what Dave Stevens put in the book. Let's find it here. Now this book is in alphabetical order, which is a little bit unusual being in alphabetical order because you're not really sure if Ackerman's the most important thing or the least versus like weight bias. So with it in alphabetical order, it doesn't really say when, but it does contain the content of what it is. So just kind of focusing on roll center. We'll just talk about the start here. It says by lowering the front, the blue line becomes longer, and they're talking about these charts here on the side. You can see that you get some charts, you get some description. It says, therefore, the car will roll more and traction will be increased. It will take time to roll, so the car will react slower to steering input and feel less responsive. Using a lower roll center will assist in reduced traction rolling because it doesn't get that initial bite. Right, so that describes the traditional look and understanding of a low roll center. Now I did notice that you get a quick graph here, a quick chart, and it'll say roll center changes. So here it's focusing on the front, lower, higher, and one bullet I noticed in here was a low roll center where above it says it will take a bit of time to roll. They say it increases front traction, more steering response, which is completely opposite to what it said up here in the top part, where it said will take more time to roll, so it'll react slower. So I recognize this little table from a Huddy setup guide, so an X-ray setup guide. Let's take a look at that. Put my little placeholder there. So I went and I looked at the Huddy setup guides. And back in 2012-ish, they were saying that a lower roll center made the car less responsive. This is a cut and paste from a screenshot. And then I noticed in 2020-ish, the setup guides don't have any date in them. They said a lower roll center improved the steering response. So somewhere along the line, X-ray changed that bullet, and I think Dave Stevens copied that bullet. Now, improved steering response from the car slowly rolling doesn't make sense. So I looked up even further. Now this is an additional book here. This is the Setup Helper, again by X-ray, Huddy. And in this Setup Helper, they talk about, let's see if we can get it on the screen, front roll center. When you lower the front roll center, it says that decreases steering into corner, car is less responsive, easier to use in high grip conditions, which is, the same as what it said in that initial paragraph. So I think we need some clarification there from Dave Stevens, or maybe from yourselves if you want to put a comment in the video, and we'll talk about that. But typically a low roll center, the car rolls, it takes time to build grip. High roll center has more initial grip, but because it didn't roll, you get overall less grip. So control, there we go, roll center, adjustment. Next chapter, tweak. There's a small section here on chassis tweak. I think chassis tweak is more important for on-road cars because their springs are typically stiffer and they're lower to the ground, more reactive. But for off-road, it's a consideration too. This little section describes what it is and how to adjust it, which is good. Only several pages on it. And then there's a little section on trucks. Considerations basically for larger RCs. So the difference between a two-wheel drive buggy and maybe a two-wheel drive short course is the 200 grams of body that are on the top of it. And that will make the car or truck roll more. And there are different settings that you have to do for that. For stadium truck though, very similar to two-wheel drive buggy. And the setup is very close or similar concepts. But for a short course, the concepts are a little bit different. He highlights those in this section. Next section, 8 scale. Now the whole book to this point has been dedicated to more of a 10th scale, although all the adjustments make sense being applied to any scale regardless, but it talks about specific things to 8 scale because these are a heavier vehicle. When they go and they race on larger track conditions, higher jumps, and there's a few pages on that. There's not a whole lot of detail in there, but it just highlights those ideas. Now, case studies. At first I didn't like the case study section, but I've grown to really appreciate this section. And what the case studies will do is will focus on a racer during the day, a race day. So what it'll take you through is, say, Bruno Coelho, as he's preparing for the Worlds, when he did his first qualifier, he did this, and then he would do another adjustment for the second qualifier, and then for the third qualifier, he would make another change. So it kind of explains how to adjust your car through a race day, where maybe a new racer or an existing racer who hadn't been at a big event like that, might not consider that. If you're just club racing, maybe you make no changes through the day. But at these big events, people do changes through the day to try to keep ahead of the changing track conditions. So that highlights that section. Let's see what we got here. Okay, now we're getting into the appendices, and this is where the meat of where the gold is back in these appendices. You can get an ebook, little glossary of terms that are used throughout the book, little hints on how to, like the beginner's guide, like if it's your first time at a race or first time really getting into bigger races, what to expect, learning how to drive on a track quickly, beginner's advice. So a good little section there. But for me, and I'll just say for like the more experienced drivers that are a little bit beyond the setup sheet type of person, where you get the setup sheet, but you want to tune that setup to your track and to your driver style. This section, it really, this is the gold to this book. And here's an example of that. Within this section is like they call it the quick reference, but so I just kind of highlighted here traction, how to increase. And then if you need to know how to increase, you're on a slippery track, how would you do that? And it says use additive. So you see people put sauce on their tires depending on the track condition. You might want to change your ride height to be higher, within reason it says. And then change the shock position. Stand the shocks up to up on the shock tower. And then there's a whole bunch more. You do in this section, you do the changes in the order that they're presented. And you'll see that there's these little blue sections, and that's Ray Monday giving hints and talking about what kind of changes you should make. And in there, we'll just take a look at the back here. There's all sorts of different troubleshooting, where it talks about correcting the key balance issues. Here we have like the traction, steering if you need more steering or you have too much steering, troubleshooting for bump handling, changing tracks, fast sweeper cornering. So if you notice that your car is having problems in different areas, this quick reference. And then you go back to the page, and from that page it'll take you step by step through the changes that you need to make to cure that condition. Now the reason that I covered those is because those are Dave's secrets. They're not mine to give. So what I've learned is that a new racer would start from the front of the book and read to the back. A racer with experience would start from the back, find the condition that they're trying to fix, and go to the front. And in that section you can see when it says use additive, it would refer you to the page number that talked about it, or ride height refers you to the page number. So it's pretty good. It's a pretty well laid out book in that aspect. Once you learn how the book is laid out, it's really helpful. So, Off-Road Racer's Guide, Dave B. Stevens. Excellent book. If you were to have a book on your in your pit to give you a hand, those quick reference guides are invaluable. I've seen those actually save racers big race events where they get into a set of traction rolling as the track grip built over the event, and step by step how to cure that. So that is invaluable. I'll put the links to everything that I mentioned in the description. Reference to Ray Monday's sites, reference to Dave Stevens' books, and to those setup guides. So thanks a lot for watching. If you like this, click like. If you want to see more of the setup guide series, click subscribe and you'll be notified when the next one shows up. And if you have any comments, or if you can describe that change to roll center, put a comment in the video below. So thank you very much. See you next video.